today we're talking, this is part 2, as we discuss audience measurement. And the second part of the chapter also includes certain things about how audience measurement hooks up with advertising sales, which I don't know why they put it there, because it's basically advertising. But we can cover some of the important things in that. But let's just come back to a few things that we talked about last class, just to remind ourselves of stuff. Let's see here. In talking about radio research, audience research, we talked about the use of diaries in most of the markets in the country. First of all, you remember the abbreviation for the way that Nielsen carves up the country into geographic areas that they then study? That's a new concept that we'll come up with today. But so there was a market. Do you remember what they did? There was a bunch of different ones, right? But the primary one was the DMA, okay? The designated market area. So Bay Area would be one of those, right? So the country is carved up into about 200 DMAs. It's different for radio, for television, but they're pretty much located around big population centers. And then so each DMA has, is the subject of research. San Francisco Bay Area would be researched as a partial DMA, but then also Nielsen will study the entire country at four times a year, basically. Nielsen studies the whole country as well. So for the networks, they're competing with each other based on those big national studies, which has larger samples and stuff, much more expensive to run. So they don't run them on a continual basis. Versus the local markets are done on a continual basis, because then their clients are stations within a local market. So if we're talking now radio, and there's a lot of overlaps between radio and TV, but there's some specific stuff. So do you remember most of the smaller markets, they use diaries. Do you remember what the 50 largest markets approximately use in order to gather the data about audience listening? It was a little electronic device. Do you remember the name of it?
PPM.
The PPM, right, the PPM. So, yeah. And, okay, so the PPM came in, and as we told a story last class about how it kind of upended the industry, that it was the new, more precise data coming out of the PPM squished, the highest performers down and brought up actually the lowest performers in each DMA, and so it made it much more competitive, much to the distress of everybody. Did it eliminate all of the problems that you might possibly have with No, it didn't. So it didn't eliminate all the problems. You still have problems, for instance, with sample characteristics and stuff. You got to make sure your sample actually is demographically similar to the entire market. So, if there's 15% Hispanic listeners in a particular market, you got to make sure that 15% of your sample has those people meters, right? So that's an important thing. So that didn't completely fix everything, but it did get things going anyway. And let's see here. So some stuff about, we talked about in television, we talked about the difference between ratings and share. So now we're talking about television, television audience analysis. So remember, for instance, here I'd have a question for you. Let's pose, well, first of all, let's say, if I was going to make a little equation here, for ratings, let's write this up here, for ratings, two very simple numbers, right? Let's say 10,000 people watched a TV show. So 10,000 people, so we'd say 10,000 impressions, 10,000 people watched a TV show. Now, for ratings, I should be comparing the 10,000 people who watched the show to what exactly? You don't need to tell me a number here, but what am I?
Households.
Households watching TVs, right? So let's say I have 100,000 households. It's a small market. So households using TV, all right? So this would be the equation for ratings, right? So what would be my rating in this case? 10,000 out of 100,000?
10%.
10%, exactly. So I would have a 10% rating if 10,000 people, now, let's say only 50,000 people turned on their TVs that night. So 50,000 actually watching, but still 10,000 impressions, 10,000 people watched the show. So we'd get a calculation of 20% in this case. And what would we call this measurement? What are we doing here?
The share.
The share, right? Okay. So if this is still a little, what are they talking about? Okay. We're stepping towards fully understanding this. But the idea being that, research will tell us there were 10,000 people who actually watched a show. So that never changes. And that's what Nielsen brings back from the audiometers attached to the televisions, and et cetera. They find out, okay, 10,000 people watched that show. Now, they're going to produce both of these different, products from that. The ratings is going to be the number of people who watched compared to the total number of households using television in the market, right? So if there's 100,000, okay. And the share is going to be a little bit different because here they're just going to evaluate still the same number of people watching the show, but now they're evaluating only the number of televisions that were actually on. So if it was a quiet, if people were out, it's a Friday night or a Saturday night, everyone goes out, does different things, then not everybody who has a television actually turns it on. So the share is going to it's always going to be a measurement of a smaller universe, a smaller bunch of potential audience than ratings is, right? Because ratings is everybody who has a TV, so that's a big number. But share is just those who turned on, the families that turned on their TV. So share is always going to be higher than ratings because it just makes sense, right? Share is only the people who turn their TV on. Not everybody turns their TV on every night during every listening period. So the denominator is always going to be smaller because it's a smaller group that you're measuring there. So that's the difference between ratings and share in TV measurement and stuff. Okay, cool. So that is the only kind of math, and it will be simple math. Well, there's one other thing I'll tell you about today, which also can be calculated, but we try to keep it pretty simple. The main thing is just to remember the difference between ratings and share. Do we need to clarify that again? We came at it kind of like through a calculation, but last class. Okay, that's cool. So now also ratings varies depending on let's see, we're talking TV over here. Let's say radio up here. So another thing that I wanted to get out there, we talked about radio ratings, in the big markets using the PPM. And also in all markets, one of the things that is measured in radio is AQH. You remember what that stands for?
Average quarter hour.
Quarter hour, yep. Somebody just said average quarter hour. That's right. So what this means is that in radio, at least, the hour is always divided into segments and 15-minute segments in the hour. And so what's being measured here is how many people listen to 5 minutes or more within a quarter hour period, right? So we talked about the strategy of, programming on that hot clock to make sure that you get enough people and spending enough time in a quarter hour segment so that you can count them in, let's say, 2 segments or something like that. So the average quarter hour, something that I didn't say last class, but it's also, this is common to radio because people dial flip so much that, it would be quite possible for you in the hour to visit 5, 6 stations easily. So the quarter hour just is a way of kind of making an approximation about that. But one of the weaknesses of it, or whatever, everyone knows about it, but it's basically you could be counted several times in the quarter hour if you're here for 5 minutes, you get counted in this quarter hour, you flip off to another station and then come back. And when you come back, if you're back for another 5 minutes, you'll also be counted again in that quarter hour. So it creates, some people would say it kind of inflates the numbers, AQH,
Yeah,
right? Because you may be counted 2, 3 times if you go and come back and go.
Yeah, if you flip off and then you come back, it kind of got you back. So
yeah,
not really.
You see a value there too, and I think advertisers do see a value there too, and everyone's aware that this is how it works. Yeah. But for advertisers who are interested in just knowing the unique listeners, so in other words, you don't want people counted twice. We already talked about CUME last time, which is cumulative viewing or listening. So what that CUME would give you like a number of individuals, at least in radio listening. It would be like, I don't know, 200,000 or something like that as your CUME. So whereas average quarter hour would give you a percentage, like 3% were in that quarter hour or something. But CUME promises you these are the number of individuals who actually, listened to the station over a period of time. And CUME is usually given in much larger segments than quarter hours. It could be the day part, so for the entire morning drive, this is the number of unique individuals who heard your show, or it could be even for a longer period. In TV, they take longer periods because they maybe want to know, how many unique individuals saw my run of commercials, and I want to know over a week because I want to know those who got it live, those who, watched it off a DVR, and those who might have streamed it from Hulu within a week. So CUME would be really useful at that point for you to, just be able to report back if you're an agency to say, yeah, your campaign actually reached 150 million people nationwide over, that week, and that sounds really good, So that would be a useful metric for television. Okay, so we've got important things: AQH, CUME, ratings, share. These are important concepts, and any questions about them? And if it appears like kind of nitpicky, just remember we'll review all of this before you actually get tested on it. But that's these are some important things. History-wise, who came up with the Audiometer? Remember, the Audiometer was a hardware device that was on your Nielsen. That's right. So that was Nielsen's big claim to objectivity, was that, well, we don't have to ask them. We can actually take this little ticker tape out of their radio, and we can see where they tuned their radio. So that was Nielsen doing radio research in the 1930s. That was their big innovation. And the Audiometer, they still call some of their set-top products the Audiometer. So that's cool. Oh boy, okay. Well, I think that's enough of a review. Let's jump into some new stuff today, which is more oriented towards internet, which is more complex, but we can tell a simpler story about the internet, which will certainly make my life easier. Okay, let's check this out though, because we're giving a lot of emphasis to the counting of audience members. And of course, Nielsen would know demographic information about, age, gender, and the income levels of the households that they're studying and stuff. But they don't actually get any qualitative data out of that type of research. They don't know why people watch the shows or if they're satisfied with them. They may just find out, okay, it was on and you were in the room. That's about all they know. Were you happy? So that they don't know too much about. So there are other forms of research which delve into deeper into audiences' preferences and stuff like that. So ratings would still give you certain things like psychographics, like, you know, the families that participate in Nielsen research, they'll fill out long questionnaires about their different things that they do and stuff like that. But for additional information, radio, for instance, does audience research, a number of different things. Sometimes they call this auditorium research, where they'll book like a hotel auditorium or something. They'll invite, like, you know, they'll publicize it on the air. It's like, you know, come meet up with us. You'll meet a couple of celebrity DJs. We'll give away some junk from the station. And we'll play you some new songs that you've never heard before. See if you like it. Or, you know, they'll often do this if they're breaking in new talent or trying to hire people as well, especially in a big market where those are critical decisions. They'll also play, so they'll play songs. They'll play like on-air, they call them air checks, like recordings of new personalities that are going to be on the air. And they play this back, and people basically fill in questionnaires about, you know, whether they like it, whether they don't. So that's one way that this is done, and more because that's expensive to get everybody out. They also will do this over the internet. So they'll get together like an internet panel and, you know, put up, you know, you can enter into this sort of secure little web page and then listen to a bunch of songs and stuff. And tell us if you like them or if you don't. You can listen to DJs. And also, this is there are companies in LA which do this for, you know, entire genres of music. So there, you wouldn't have to run this yourself. You could pay like a monthly fee to this company, and this company tests out all the new stuff that comes from the record publishers or, you know, the streaming sites and stuff. And gives you like audience data. Did they like it? Did they not? And sometimes they'll test older songs for what they call the burn rate, just to see if people are fed up of hearing this. Then they'll have statistics about that as well. So if you're a participating radio station, it's not very expensive either. Like a music director at a radio station would then be scanning that, saying, oh, okay, this is rating pretty low now, but we've got 10 new songs. Let's put them into rotation. And, you know, so a big station owner like Clear Channel with, you know, tens of thousands of stations would run this type of operation themselves and put that. I mean, a big complaint about Clear Channel is that now iHeartRadio is that their stations in each market all sound exactly the same. So whether you're here or in New Orleans, you know, you're going to hear the same music, although it's a ridiculously different kind of musical environment, right? But Clear Channel would do it like all based on these big auditorium surveys. They're based in Texas, so they'd get, you know, people in there, and they'd program for the whole nation that way, which is cost efficient, but it sucks in terms of creating, you know, a diverse radio type of. You know. So they're also, you know, you can do this by phone. You know, ding ding, hello, would you like to participate? Sure, and then you know, they'll play hooks and say, which one did you like? And, you know, press 5 for whether it was really good, or press 1 whether it sucked. So all of these is a way of getting some information about what you like, what you don't like. And in TV, there's some of this too. I've heard tell of CBS having auditoriums permanently in Vegas. And Disney having auditoriums permanently associated with, is it Disney World or Disneyland? I'm not sure. But it's kind of entertaining for people. Like, hey, come and participate. See a new show you've never seen before. And so everyone goes into an auditorium and they get these little meters. Like, I like it, I don't like it. You know, this, and so they can twist the knob depending on what they like. And they'll do this with movies as well, but they do it with TV too, just to see how people react to pilots and stuff. So, you know, when you come in, they'll also kind of try to break it down by, you know, a few short questions before we begin. How old are you? You know, are you a boy or a girl? You know, what's your highest level of education? Would you care to tell us how much money you make? And with that type of stuff, then they come away with you know, a kind of a second by second impression of how you responded to a pilot or stuff. And of course, in feature films, they'll rewrite the ending based on these types of
I had
research.
a person who knew someone who said they just were walking outside of a movie theater, and a guy just pulled them in like, we got, free tickets for you, and they didn't tell him what they were watching, and it ended up being The Matrix. When he came back
Oh my
out,
gosh.
he saw it, and he was like, that's what I saw for testing when the dude pulled me in.
And how did they tell you how they
Yeah,
collected the
he just had
information?
a piece of paper with a whole 25 questions, and then they talk to you in a big group, and
Cool.
exactly that. What did you like? What didn't you like? What
Okay.
worked? What didn't work?
Right.
Super analytical, but he said it didn't make it fun. It just, and he didn't know what it was.
Yeah, it's work.
For years out, like 2 years after or something like that.
Oh, amazing.
So,
Classic film, though. My God, what
Right.
that film is like, wow, incredible.
yeah.
Oh, cool. So that's a good point about how it all works. Just something was coming up while you were talking there too. Oh yeah, that kind of like twist the dial. I like it. I don't like it. I noticed that during the presidential debates they had it. That they would have like a little line running underneath as like, oh, this is positive, this is negative. I guess it was CNN. I can't remember what channel I was on watching that. It was kind of like live, audience reaction, actually put out there on TV, which was, oh, okay. Compare yourself to what the rest of the population is thinking. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. There's also some physiological testing, which I've never heard anybody who's been involved in that, but they'll also like monitor certain things like heart rate and stuff like that, which it seems marginal now, but eventually when our computer screens are watching us, it'll definitely be able to tell like pupils dilating or not, things like that. So there, in the science fiction realm of the new kinds of interactive programming that are going to happen, I hear tell of people, for instance, creating musical services with calming music if you have physiological signs of anxiety and stuff like that. There are app makers who are thinking that way. Whether, I guess that's just an extension out of the type of media research we're talking about. Anyhow, that stuff does exist, but it's way less prevalent than the Nielsen's in radio or television, which are like constantly going on and are very influential versus these are, the more qualitative research is important when you're launching a program, but then off it goes. You've tested it, it tests well, you show the pilot, you hope it lasts over the first 4 or 5 week showings, which is usually when stuff starts to get canceled. And if you've made it out of that, then you're on your way, and then how many seasons can you keep this up? Because, I remember Dan Harmon, the creator of Community and now of the animated thing, which I'll blank on. You guys watch? Yeah, Rick and Morty. Yeah, so he's basically a genius. But just talking about Community, he says, well, how come? Because he got fired off of Community, then it got canceled, then it got brought back, and he got rehired and stuff. And he said, a TV show is like a paper airplane. You throw it, you hope it flies. And then, the rest of the time you're blowing hot air to try to make it stay up as long as it possibly can. But eventually it's just going to crash and go off the air. The idea is just how long can you keep it on? And I'm a big fan anyway. And he's like one of the most articulate guys creating TV. He's always got something in it. He's got a whole website full of these kinds of reflections, which is pretty cool. Look him up. Okay, close parenthesis. I'm not on politics today. I'm on personal favorite shows or TV show creators. But anyhow, here's something I won't draw on the board, but CPM. Okay, here we're getting into how does audience measurement translate into the value of an ad spot. And so CPM is the way the industry, there are many measurements, just like there are many measurements of ratings. But CPM is the way that the industry kind of compares different media. Because very often people are not buying media exposure in isolation. They'll do a campaign which will have TV spots and web advertising for sure, and maybe some radio or maybe some print even, who knows. And so it's a highly technical operation to decide how much money and where to put it, and what's the best medium for what you want to do. And of course, there's social too now, and so your social is becoming a bigger and bigger part of any campaign as well, because you put up a TV commercial, well, you want to also drive people to see that and talk about it on social media. So the one metric that really holds across media is CPM, which is cost per mil. And so mil here means cost per 1,000 viewers. So, you can look at any medium and say, okay, they want, let's say, they want $100 for me to advertise to these 1,000 people, And so that would be, CPM is basically, it would be, your CPM there would be $100. If it costs you $100 to reach 1,000 people, or let's say, $1,000 to reach 10,000 people, your CPM is going to be 100. So, and you can use that to compare different media, figure out, well, is it a better deal to, if I want to reach this many people, is it a better deal to do it through television, or should I do it through web? And all of this is tracked. So just before we began, because I was looking for the latest information, and I wasn't able to find something that was really, really good, but here is it. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, so this is from 2014, which is why I was a little disappointed in it. But here's the cost per mil, the CPM of, just averaged out for different media. And of course, again, a media buyer would want to know more about each individual, social media, but are we talking Twitter, or are we talking Facebook? And so these would all be a little bit different, but look at the price differences. CPMs, direct mail is very expensive. Broadcast TV, $28, second most expensive. And then as you go down, it's getting cheaper and cheaper, a $10 CPM in radio, and then your outdoor advertising and your social media being among the cheapest there. So we could immediately say, well, what about web? Because I don't see that up there. So in the little bit of time that I had to fish around for the latest, I couldn't come up with something that was really comprehensive. But there's a start anyway. And typically what you'll see is broadcast TV as being amongst the most expensive CPM channel. In terms of CPM, it's expensive. Again, you'd have to break this down. Is it national? Is it spot advertising locally? That would be cheaper, so on, because national exposure is going to cost you the most to deal with a network and things like that, especially on those big events like the Super Bowl. So, those would be in a kind of special category of and it would get even more expensive. But remember, what we're doing is we're breaking it down over 1,000 people watching. So even if you've got 250 million, people watching, you gotta, if you're paying $5 million for a Super Bowl spot, you're also reaching a huge number of people. So your CPM is probably floating around there. We could work it out, but that would be embarrassing because I'm sure I'd make a mistake. So CPM, remember, it's cost per mil, and it is which means cost per 1,000 people, and it allows you to compare media. So if it costs you $100 to reach 1,000 people, your CPM is 100. Yeah. So, okay. Is there anything else there? Other measurements, which I don't want you to remember because I won't test you on them, but for instance, media buyers sometimes buy a cost per point, per ratings point when they're buying TV. So this is kind of building in some hedging against the risk of buying TV advertising, because you never know how a show is going to do. Maybe it's going to rate poorly this season, even though it was a great show doing really well last year and the year before. Maybe this year the audience falls off, And so, if you bought just based on that show, you could be, you're not getting as good a deal for your money because you expected it to have certain rating and it fell down. So you can buy also based on rating point, so that what you're evaluating there is no matter how well the show is doing, you're paying for rating rather than just to be on, advertising on a show. So you can buy that way. And also a GRP is another kind of TV buying term where basically this takes account of the frequency of showings of your ad. So it's like this, in this case, if your ad screens 1,000 times, then you're counting that into your evaluation of how much you're paying and how well you're doing. So there's a couple of variations, but CPM is what I'd like you to remember. So like before we get there, let's just see here. Okay, the way it works nationally is they have, Nielsen does what they call the sweeps. And I mentioned that this is their big national survey. So it's 4 times a year. Sort of every quarter, they'll do a sweep. And it's typically in November, it's in May, and a couple other times. But the November and the May are really important. November because you're getting close to Christmas. And May is the most important of the sweeps because it's just before what they call the upfronts.
Like the finales?
It's not really tied to the finales of the shows, except that the finales always rate really highly. So that's a good point. In terms of programming, you'll see the finales of the shows, or you'll also see in programming what they call stunting, when you do something crazy, like the all-musical episode of SUV or something. It's like, whoa, why are they doing that? Well, it's in order to make people go, oh, that's crazy, let me watch, okay? So what they definitely want, and this good point, JP, is they want the highest possible numbers during the sweeps. And the May sweep is just before what's called the upfronts, and this is where the networks sell their advertising for, like, let's say the fall 2018 season. All the advertising for that, they'll make it available to sell at the May 2018 upfronts. And the sweeps, the big sweeps, happen just before that, so that Nielsen has the latest data for all of the networks. So at the upfronts, about $8 billion of commitments are made for buying television spots on the networks. That is what Google makes for the entire year in terms of search advertising. So it's still a huge business. And Olive, did you have a question?
The Olympics, for instance, they're going to be putting advertisements throughout the whole, 3 weeks or so. Do they put that in this coming November? They do sweeps, they figure out what needs to be put in there, I guess?
Well, sweeps are, like in the TV industry, sweeps are the most comprehensive research, so across the country. And so because they're sampling a national audience, that data is most relevant to the networks, because the networks have their national, right? The networks are in every market, ABC, CBS, NBC, they are nationwide. So they're most interested in the data that comes out of the sweeps. And then the sweeps are, as a sales tool, the most important of the sweeps come in May, just before the upfronts, when they have to sell a lot of ad spots on shows that don't yet exist. They're not yet on the air, right? In May, you're selling for the shows that start in September. So Olive, ask your question again.
I guess I was a little confused on, have they already kind of gotten ready for what's going to be the advertisements for February when the Olympics come about?
Oh.
On the Olympics.
Well, the spot availability is already sold.
They've already done.
As to whether those have been produced, that's sort of more like, the ad agencies are working with the clients who have bought those spots. So I don't know whether they know exactly like what angle they're going to take, what product they're going to do, but you know, if who's showing the Olympics broadcast?
NBC, right?
It's NBC, is it? Yeah, okay. So NBC would, you know, part of their upfronts would probably be, coming up. You can buy well in advance time on the Olympics, but they do it for every show. And the upfronts, they happen like over a week in New York, and the Spanish language ones happen in Miami. And basically, so there's like, it's just like this huge convention for media buyers from advertising or media buying companies, and every day they've got 2 or 3 network presentations and they bring on the stars of all of these sitcoms and everything. They do these big stage shows. Jimmy Kimmel's always there for, is it ABC?
ABC, yeah.
Yeah, so he's always there, sort of basically, and all of this is put on just for the media buyers, you know. And the trades all report, you know, oh, this year 2% gain. It's not as much as we'd hoped, but it's, you know, year after year the broadcasters are still they're still selling more in the upfronts than they would. So the connection between the sweeps and the upfronts where they sell these ads is really important. And of course they won't sell everything throughout the year. They sell the leftovers. But if you want the best stuff is sold during the upfronts, when you don't even know whether the show will be canceled or whether it'll be performing. So in the contracts made in the upfronts, there's usually what they call make goods, which is if you bought into a show that you thought would do well, but it gets canceled, the network promises to make good on it, that whatever replaces, they'll make sure that you have the equal value of advertising time on whatever replacement shows are out there. So they understand that it's risky to invest in front. But let's say in the upfronts, if you buy into a show that doesn't yet exist, but it turns out to be a hit, then you've got a bargain, you know, because you paid a price that maybe the show performs a lot better than you thought it would. And so upfronts is kind of risky, but it's important. Okay, cool. So I'm looking up here, some of the pricing stuff that we're talking about here, we talked about before. In terms of radio, I showed you that printout of the Clear Channel price sheet, which, as I said, is something that would usually never be shown to a client. Your base rate is just the start of a price for negotiation. And also it's dynamic, right? It's just like getting a hotel room or buying an airline ticket now. Depending on when you buy, the price will change. In addition, there are discounts as well, frequency discounts or local discounts. So that means if you buy a bunch of spots, each one will cost you less than if theoretically you just went to buy one spot. And as we said, nobody buys just one spot because there's no way of proving whether that's at all useful to your business. You have to advertise over an extended period of time to see any kind of result, you know. So they'll never just sell you a single spot in isolation. And so even that price sheet that I showed you, which put the base rate of a minute of radio advertising at about $900 per minute during the best day parts. When do you think are the best day parts in radio?
Daytime?
Morning commute.
Commute time, yeah. So daytime, sure, would be in the morning, morning drive, or in the afternoon when you're driving back, yeah. So those day parts are the most valuable, and we did look through that pricing sheet and we saw that, you know, whoa, it was really expensive during the afternoon drive, KMEL was anyway, but overnight it was like $30 per minute or something. It was like nothing because your audience drops way down there, so it's not worth very much. So yeah, radio sells by day parts versus TV. It's a different type of audience experience, right? TV is going to sell in prime time. It's going to be different than in daytime, but radio is really tied to day parts, and it's most expensive during the morning drive or the afternoon commute. And remember, there were also some deals. You could get the run of schedule, which is just like basically you tell the station, it's like, okay, you know, I want a better rate, and so I'll let you choose when you put the stuff in. Whatever availability you have, plug my spots in there. But if you want a fixed buy because you're a client who is like, we've got a national campaign coming up in 3 weeks, and I want to make sure that all my spots run in the next 3 weeks at a particular time, or if you're a fast food operation and you want to make sure that people are only hearing you like when they're going to be hungry just before lunch or something, you can make a fixed buy, but that costs more. So you're saying basically, I only want to be in this hour. So there you go. And there's the discounts, and then there's a couple of other deals that you'll always hear about, like bartering, where you trade airtime for some other consideration. So bartering, you may have a deal with a fast food outlet where your DJ is going to talk about it, that's also value. Like whenever the DJ talks about any commercial product, they're being paid for that. That's all logged, that's all contracted. DJ's not allowed to talk just off the cuff about some great thing that you could buy. That's payola, that's illegal. So anytime you hear the DJs, I was just in Tahoe over the weekend enjoying, skiing at this resort, that's all paid for. It's not a spot, but it's also promotion. So that's paid for. So let's say you and your radio station go in with Red Bull during some kind of sporting event or something like that. Maybe Red Bull doesn't pay you money, but they give away at the sporting event all kinds of your promotional materials as well. So there's all kinds of bartering going on where money doesn't change hands, but different considerations are, there's a value there anyway. Which, by the way, for tax purposes has to be assigned a money value. You can't just trade it because you have to account for its value. Partly because media businesses like Clear Channel, iHeartRadio, they have investors. Every investor needs to know how much money the operation is spending, how much it's taking in. So there's got to be value there. And then the other thing here is cooperative ads. So co-ops happen in TV, they happen in radio. This is where, like for instance, Toyota will want to advertise a new car, and they'll say, okay, we want everyone to hear about this, so we're going to partner with a retailer, like a car, a local car dealer, and we will pay half of whatever it costs for the local dealer to advertise locally. So Toyota is going to participate with the local dealer, and if you're in radio sales, you're going to want to know that so that when you go see the local dealer, you say, hey, have you taken advantage of this great deal? I know that you're a Toyota dealer, and Toyota could pay for half of all of this. Why don't you buy some more spots? And so they're always watching those co-op arrangements because they want to maximize that when they go see their clients. And there's, throughout many different industries, have co-op agreements like that, if there's like a national type of thing. All right, okay. So I jumped over cable into program testing. This is weird, okay, because I don't know, we're not talking about television program testing, we're talking about the internet here. Some ideas here, and I know it's coming at you fast and furious. So let's try to just kind of generalize here a little bit. When it comes to accounting for audience through the internet, you can, traditionally the way it was done was to count up the number of hits on any particular web page and count those as impressions, rather as unique views of an ad, rather like somebody was looking at a magazine. So, they were used to that basically. You'd go to buy a magazine space, and Time magazine had a circulation of so many millions, and that they would look at that page, so that was how many million impressions that you had. Well, that carried over onto websites where they would count the number of hits on a page, and clickbait still is based on that, right? We talked about that in the early days, how pissed off we are about, something, it's like 15 incredible things that you never could have thought about, and then you click on it and they're far from incredible. They're just boring, stupid clickbait. But that made you hit the page, and so there is some money involved in that, although it's gotten less and less and less as internet advertisers realize there's not a lot of value in it. And part of that is many reasons for this. Number one is automated bots or spiders that go through the web and basically, they bring it. They click on pages, but they're not real people. They're just there for search engines to find out what's out there, or for people to game the system of advertising and to get a lot of hits on pages, which actually are not valuable. So that makes advertisers question this. And other things like caching, which is like if you visit a web page once, your computer stores that information. The next time you go back, it loads that up basically from memory in your computer, and if nothing's changed on the page, there's no actual hit on the internet page. And so there's a lot of reasons why hits is kind of an unreliable measurement. And I can't remember, for instance, in the book what technology it actually refers to.
It says push technology, so I think it's talking about clicking itself.
Okay, so
I think.
yeah, alrighty. So another way of keeping track of what goes on is cost per click. So if you click on a banner ad or any other ad, that is sold through. So what that means is you can buy advertising. Your ad will sit on the page, but you won't pay until someone actually clicks on it and goes to watch your video or whatever is triggered by that click. So that's called cost per click. And there are click-through rates, which means if you click through to something else and do something, then you get paid. And pay per click, which is just when, okay, you clicked and that's it. You didn't have to do anything, you just clicked, and then the client pays for that. So this is viewed as a better type of metric because the audience actually had to do something. They had to click in order to get that. All right, and then there's finally a much smaller percentage of this is cost per transaction. So there you wouldn't pay anything unless you clicked through and actually bought something. So that's a much less common thing.
What about spam?
So spam comes through email, which would be like a modern day sort of direct advertising thing. So I guess, I guess you go out and buy that. I don't know exactly how it works. Yeah, but it's more like direct marketing. Instead of mail to your house, it's mailed to your email address. I imagine the rates wouldn't be that high because people, it all gets screened out, filtered
they just
out.
have to know email addresses, which
Yeah.
I assume they can get from.
But then, Google or whoever you get your email through is trying to filter that all the time to cut down on the amount of spam, because otherwise it would really detract from what they were doing, right? And so when we are talking about hits, CPM can still be used to kind of measure, to compare basically, as to what the value of that is. And then also, as all of this has evolved, people are just, advertisers are thinking, well, the fact that you clicked or that the page was open, were you looking at it, or was it just one of 50 tabs that's already open and you were doing something else? So they do try to measure how much time you're actually engaging with the material. And that's why you're seeing more video come up as well, because it's assumed that while the video is playing, you're actually doing something on the site, and it's extending your time watching that page. So, more powerful than just clicking on a page and what do we call it? There was a skyscraper ad there or something. It's just sitting there. It's like maybe you're not even paying any attention to it, right? But if a video comes up full screen, well, then we can assume that you're spending more time with it. So yeah, there you go. I'm jumping over a bunch of stuff because it's way too much, but ad exchanges, ad auctions and stuff. So we talked about ad auctions, kind of the cutting edge of internet ad placement now is that, maybe if you're a web publisher, you sell a certain amount of your screen real estate directly or through your advertising or whatever ad exchanges you participate in. So ad exchanges are really something of the internet. Basically, what it is it's if you're an advertiser, you can contract with an ad exchange to have your ads placed on a whole range of web properties, like 1,000 blogs if you want, or something like that. You know, if you've got a garden hose, you know, thing or something like that, you can go to an ad exchange, and the ad exchange has maybe, you know, 1,000 blogs and a bunch of kind of online sites for home renovation and stuff like that. And they have it in many different verticals. They'll have it for automotive, they'll have it for home maintenance, they'll have it for beauty products, they'll have it for, you know, and so they may literally have contracts with thousands of web publishers. You go to them and you say, okay, I want to hit, you know, everybody who might, you know, have an audience of people who want to buy my garden hose or something like that. And you work with them to, you know, create a campaign and stuff. So ad exchanges are very common, you know, for the web. And let's say if you were a blogger or something and you had dreams of breaking into, you know, like a local news blog or something like that for your neighborhood, if you get a big enough audience, you can go to an ad exchange and say, okay, I've got these many people who are interested in this location, and you can get on with an ad exchange, and then they'll start placing stuff on your web page. All right. Now, let's say you've got some extra space that is not sold by you or by an ad exchange. You can go to Google, and Google will buy up that extra space and place their ads in there too. And it's a very, you know, well-established product. And inside some of the ad exchanges, but definitely Google AdSense, will conduct what we called ad auctions, right? So remember what that is based on the cookies that are on your computer, the little bits of software that record where you went, what you looked at, and stuff like that, which your browser can access. So when you land on a web page, you know, your garden hose blog or something like that, and there's a spot here which Google is selling for, as you land on the page, it'll call out for your cookies. It'll scan your cookies and said, ooh, this dude has been looking for 50-foot long garden hoses. And that information will be communicated back to Google. And what you see is, you know, an ad which is like scarily tailored to what you've been looking at online. But what also is going on back there is Google will conduct an auction lasting split seconds behind the scenes. And they'll say, okay, I have here someone who's interested in 50-foot long garden hoses. How much is worth that? How much is that worth to you? And let's say Home Depot has said, if you ever get somebody like that, I'll pay you like 0.05 cents or something to appear there. And somebody else, you know, their hardware store offered a little more. That auction happens in a split second in the background, and that advertisement will be there. So dynamically served, personalized advertising, you know, which is maximizing revenue for Google by actually having a little auction there going in the background. It's all happening so fast you don't even know that it's going on. Whew, man. And I just read that Apple Safari is trying to do away with cookies. So that whole thing we just talked about is based on tracking what you do on cookies. And you can Google it now. There's a bit of a controversy because Safari, which doesn't have a huge market share, but Safari is going to do away with cookies. And Apple is going to say, well, yeah, we know it's invasive. They're tracking you, and you don't like that, right? So go with Safari. You will, you know, you won't be tracked anymore, right?
Isn't that why you use an ad blocker?
Well, you can also do that, but the idea is like how many people go to those links. I mean, I understand a lot of people would go to those links, but the fact that in every Apple computer, Safari is the default browser that comes with the computer, so it is, you know, maybe like 15% of share of browsers. That's a huge amount that would now make this impossible. So it sounds good to the potential Apple client, but what some people are saying is that it's actually a shot at Google, right? Which is, you know, Amazon, Google, Apple, these are the gigantic behemoths of online advertising and media and stuff. If you disable a significant part of, you know, this operation, ad auctions, of which Google makes almost all of that money, basically, that's Google's big deal. If you make that impossible, maybe it's just Apple trying to shake things up for Google. That's what some people are saying. So an interesting thing. Wow. And then you got mobile marketing, ad pricing, and I guess the big thing, I think Olive brought this up in the first class, how geolocation devices, basically because your phone, we know where you are, so we can now serve mobile advertising based on where you are. So if you walk near a store, it's like we could make advertising based on that store. Well, you're nearby, why don't you drop in and pick up a garden hose? We know you've been wanting one. So it's crazy, but so that'll be like kind of the mobile thing. And of course that would be more valuable to some customers than others. So the pricing would be different depending on that, Woo. So we almost got through with that. Let's see how well we did with a Kahoot. Oh, it's becoming a tradition. As a good way of feeding you questions before, game pin or
Just connecting.
okay. I think you can join after it starts.
can, yeah.
Yeah. This one's got 15. I don't know how many we'll have. Okay. Nielsen's Audiometer was first used to measure which of the following? Yeah, there we go. Okay, radio station listeners in the 1930s. So remember the Audiometer was that little thing, that mechanical device, right? Gosh, I did even manage to review it with you. All right. DMA stands for, it was the designated market area was the right answer. So anyone who got that was correct. DMA, and boom. This
Or
is
digital media.
in a 1 million television household area, COPS is seen in 150,000 homes. What's its rating?
Oh, we should calculate.
So
I have
to put the
Oh, nobody got it right. Oh wait.
all right,
Oh.
we'll have to make.
Oh,
we'll
there
have
were
to.
two right answers.
That was confusing.
Oh no, sorry, dudes. Okay, how did I put 2 right answers? Oh my God. The correct answer is 15.
Okay, I got it.
Correct answer is 15. All right. Okay. How could I put God? Okay, let me write that down. Actually, I have to correct this before you guys start, reviewing on this or something. Okay. So the ratings question has a problem. I promise I'll do multiples of 10 on the exam. Okay, that'll be easier. Radio station ratings often measure the audience in terms of share, minutes and seconds, AQH, diary household. So looking at the board, the answer is pretty clear here.
And make all the money.
All right, AQH is a radio way of doing things, right? Because we surf back and forth, or we zap, or no, we don't zap. Well, whatever, we spin the dial and move around.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. If a spot advertisement costs $100 and reaches 1,000 people, what is its CPM? It's actually the easiest way that you could ask this question. Okay, so the correct answer is $100, right? Remember, CPM is the cost per 1,000 people, so it reaches 1,000 people. So in that case, it's $100. So that's the simplest way of asking it, because it's basically, the concept means how much does it cost to reach 1,000 people, and the question actually says it costs $100 to reach 1,000 people. Okay. Now that you're all feeling super smart, I hope we can get you another one. It's all confusing, right? But I'm going to try to keep the numbers as simple as possible. When Ford pays for half of a local car dealer's advertising, it is known as. Yay! Okay, 6 people got it right. Okay, cooperative advertising. So it's where the national manufacturer cooperates with the local sales group and pays half the price. All right. Next up, Nielsen's PPM is a. All right, 4 people got right. The portable people meter.
Well, at least I'm not personalized program.
Okay. Yep. And up we go. Diary responses can be inaccurate, but ratings based on metering devices fix those problems. True or false? So we are evaluating whether the problems were fixed or not. False is the correct answer. It didn't fix those problems. Ad exchanges are most common in which medium? I can't take it back. Yes, so the internet, right? Okay. So remember, ad exchanges is where you, even as a small-time blogger, one person operation, you can get advertising delivered to you by an ad exchange. Right? And then you don't have to go out and sell it yourself. Okay, during November, February, May, and July, Nielsen sends diaries to sample homes around the country. And this is, what do we call that? Oh, yes! Everybody gets it right. The sweeps. All right, I love it. We won't have to study that one again. All right, good. Ratings explain why viewers and listeners prefer certain programs over others. All right, everybody gets another one. Cheer goes out to you folks. Yes, so ratings tell us that there was a body in front of the screen and maybe how old the body was and what gender.
See, we do pay attention to you.
Oh, I know you do. I mean, you guys are great, especially how much, we had so much information in the last couple of days. Crazy. Barring an unlikely event, shares are always larger than ratings. Are shares always larger than ratings?
No.
I'm skeptical. Okay, so it is true. Shares are always going to be larger than events unless, I can't even imagine why. And the reason is, let's review why is that? Why is share always going to be larger than rating? Because rating, is the denominator is all of the households that use television versus share, the denominator is how many actually have the TV on. And so this is always going to be a smaller number because not everyone who has a TV is always going to have it on, And so this will be a lower number, which means that the percentage will be higher. So share is always a little bit better. It looks better. It's got a higher number. So share is preferred by broadcasters who want to show higher numbers. Which of these is an actual audience measurement challenge faced by online advertisers? We didn't get to this. So no matter how, let's face it. When you see all of these, it's probably a good bet. I was rushing so much I forgot to get to this. So, some of the problems of online audience measurement right now is just everyone has a slightly different way of doing stuff. Different samples, do they get, like the equivalent of a TV sample, or do they recruit people online, just, the faithful people who are, associated with one particular site, yada, da, da, da. Let's explain this next class or something so we can get through to the other questions. But yeah, so let me make a note of that. We didn't talk about problems. Which of the following is used to set online advertising rates? Another one. Geez, okay. Well, we did talk about it, but we didn't kind of summarize it. So this is a tough one. You have the information, but it's a tough one. All right, so it was green. Green is the right answer. So hits, cost per click, and cost per transaction would be it. So it was on a slide, but so we'll have to pay special attention if we ever use that one again. So remember the first way that, they were, if you simply hit the page, people would get paid. That appeared to be less and less value. Cost per click, when you click on something, then you get, that's viewed as more valuable, and that's pretty current. And then cost per transaction, it's a small slice of the business, but that's where you don't have to pay unless somebody actually buys something from you. So that's that one. So that was tough, again, because I didn't kind of summarize it for you. Last one. Audience activity is more important than audience size in mobile or social media. Again, we weren't prepared for that. So does this make sense to you? Audience activity is more important than audience size in mobile or social media. Yes, so 5 people kind of figured it out for sure. So yeah, this is another trend that we're seeing. And we're seeing it in relation or even in competition to older methods of rating. In other words, it matters a lot if people are tweeting about your show. And Nielsen actually measures that as a separate product. So if you are advertising through Facebook or something, They're going to monitor all of the conversations that are happening in social about your product, and they're going to try to give you a rating based on that. But even in television, old media television, people are looking not only at the rating, let's say you got 20% on that night, but they're also looking at the amount of social conversation. Especially like a show on the CW, for instance, or something, the rating will never be that high because that network doesn't have as large an audience as, ABC or CBS. But that has a young, tech-savvy audience that's probably doing a lot of tweeting about the show while it's going on or something. And so that metric will be brought up and said, yeah, we don't have huge ratings, but boy, do we have a very engaged audience that is tweeting up all kinds of, there's a lot of activity going on around the show, which, the SUV people are just like asleep at home or something. So then it makes you look better with that type of audience. So, okay, that's it. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week for the next topic.